Here we sit on the eve of opening day for Major League Baseball. I mean, well, like if you catch us like the night before on the podcast, then it's eve of opening day. It's several days before if you're catching us live via the stream, which remember you can always do. Kauffman Corner streams live, usually Sunday nights at 10, if not Monday nights at 10. A lot to cover here tonight. Daniel Lynch, shoulder tightness. What's it do to the 26-man roster? What's it do for him and his chances on the team? We're going to give you our predictions for the ball club. What's the record we're both predicting? Player of the year, pitcher of the year, surprise player, bust player. We'll make our predictions on each one of those. We'll add in 3 daring and bold predictions just about the club in general. Maybe take a quick look at the AL Central, what we expect from them, and then whether or not the Kansas City Royals actually resemble. Could we see a scenario, Rany's in-depth dive into could this be the 84 Cubs? Could this be the 08 Rays? We do it all right now on Kauffman Corner.
You're listening to Kauffman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kauffman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kauffman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions. Project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience. With paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And welcome to the Kauffman Corner Podcast, proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. As we said, much to get to tonight here on the Kauffman Corner Podcast, Rany. But let's start with the news. Daniel Lynch leaving the mound, tightness in the shoulder. What he said he felt like the shoulder was tearing off or something. I can't remember exactly how he described it, but wasn't comfortable. He said no reason to continue. Yeah, I would guess. Let's talk a little bit about the roster. It looks like it was coming into shape. We certainly had Daniel Lynch as a part of it, even though he's had a less than spectacular spring. What does this do to the 26-man roster in your mind?
Well, my first reaction, obviously, when Lynch came out of a game, that's panic mode. Right before the season, spring training is when you see more arm injuries than any other time of the year, just because guys are ramping up from 0 to 100. And unfortunately, this is the time of year where you see guys go under the knife for Tommy John surgery all the time. And so it was kind of a weird feeling for me. I don't know how you felt when he pointed to his shoulder and not his elbow.
Right.
And it was really weird because you and I are old enough to remember when the absolute worst thing that could happen to a pitcher was a shoulder injury. The rotator cuff tear was the bane of baseball. It was, it would take an elite pitcher in the prime of his career, and not only would he end up missing a year, usually a year and a half, but he would never be the same afterwards. I think back to like Oral Hershiser, coming off 59 consecutive scoreless innings in 1988 and winning the, Sportsman of the Year award, single-handedly taking the Dodgers to the championship. Coming back the next year was probably even better. And then in spring training in 1990, rotator cuff injury, was out a year and a half and was just an innings eater the rest of his career. As recently as 10, 12 years ago, Brandon Webb was one of the best pitchers in baseball. Shoulder injury, never pitched again. I mean, his career was over like that. But the game has changed, and shoulder injuries are not the death knell they used to be. In part because I think they're caught much faster. In part because the surgery seemed to be better. And if this had been his elbow, immediately you're thinking, okay, he's out for the year. He's probably out for at least part of next year. This is the worst time of year to have it because it can affect 2 seasons. When I heard shoulder, I'm like, well, as long as it's not an absolute total tear, there's a good chance we'll see him back later this year, maybe by midseason. And I think that's what we're thinking now. This is probably a 2 or 3 month injury. So, I mean, it sucks. And especially because he's one of the most crucial players on the roster in terms of the Royals needing to see what he is and whether he can take a huge step forward or not. But it's not an absolute death knell. So it sucks, but I'm actually relieved it wasn't worse than it was.
Did you have any optimism about where it was going with him this year anyway?
I mean, I still look back to the way he pitched in the minor leagues and the way, prospect mavens thought about him as recently as 12 months ago. And I'm not willing to assume that's all gone in the span of one year, especially a year where literally everyone else on the Royals roster underachieved on the mound. Yeah, I still was optimistic about him. Maybe that's unrealistic. I don't think he's going to be an ace, but I thought he'd be a number 3 starter this year. I really did. So it's a blow. It hurts. The Royals do have some depth, and maybe we were going to find out about Jordan Lyles either way, but maybe Jordan Lyles will actually have some value if it means the Royals don't have to rely so much on some of the younger guys. But I really felt his upside was as good as anybody on this roster except for Brady Singer. So it's a disappointment.
Yeah, I will say this. This to me is why you can't have guys come up and need 3 years to figure it out, right? Because they're going to get hurt. And what makes this frustrating for me is that they have to the next wave. Like I'm kind of done with 2018. Like I'm ready to just go. Brady Singer's it. I had already thought about this because it's been on my list of to-dos for this week on my radio show for a while. But I like the Brady Singer, not Brady Singer, Daniel Lynch. Like I'm kind of done with that whole crew. Like there's no reason for everybody in an organization to take 3 and 4 years to figure it out. Like Brad Keller. I mean, come on. That's where we're at right now. Is Brad Keller's going to finally pitch well his final year before he heads out? I mean, it's irrelevant. It really is. It's frustrating. And I don't put it all on the new coaching staff, right? And maybe they're the ones that finally figured it out. But I expect guys to come to the big leagues and be able to perform. And I suppose Lynch was working on some things. Like I'm a lot more tolerant of a big fat spring ERA if a guy's been around. Then I'm like, okay, he's trying this pitch, he's trying this grip, he's trying this pitch and counts. He wouldn't normally try it, but Daniel Lynch is still trying to establish himself. He needs to get people out, and he wasn't really doing it in the spring. Now maybe it's all because of the shoulder, but to me, this is just yet another of the constant reminder of why the Royals haven't been good enough at developing their own, because guys are going to get hurt. And everything, my buddy Doug Stewart said it a long time ago. When you sit around on a season, you're going over your predictions and you're like, if, you get like 5 ifs and you suck, right? Because all 5 ifs aren't coming through. And the Royals pitching staff is always like, if these 3 things happen, right? 3 of your 5 are always on what their pitching staff is supposed to be. And so it's just, for me, yeah, I feel for the young man. I was really looking forward to everybody getting a chance with the new coaching staff and hopefully them unlocking potential that had not been unlocked before. But this to me is just more of the same. And you have to wonder, is this because he's tinkering, right? He's trying to find something. He was scared. He's trying to overthrow. He's trying to break it off more on a grip. I mean, I don't know, the shoulder. Usually you're tilting the hand, you get into the elbow and different things like that. But, injuries occur, pitchers get hurt. There's the ones that are hurt and the ones that are going to be hurt, right? That's the old adage. And here it sits. For me, it's just frustrating because it's yet another reminder of how they can't get anybody to perform immediately at the big league. So every injury costs them, the ability to get anything from a guy as far as a championship caliber player would be concerned when it comes to starting pitching.
Well, to me, the irony is that when we look back at that 2018 draft class and how it's been a disappointment to this point, it's not because of injuries. Like normally when you draft pitchers and we say pitchers will break your heart, young pitchers will break your heart. The reason, you draft 10 pitchers and you expect 2 of them to actually develop. The reason for that is because they get hurt.
Right.
And yet when you look back at that draft class, Jonathan Bolin had Tommy John surgery. Hopefully he'll be 100% this year. We're hoping we might see him later this year. Other than that, injuries have not been an issue. I mean, I guess you could give the Royals some credit for, generally speaking, keeping these guys healthy. We'll see what happens with Lynch, but hopefully they avoided the worst. But the problem is they didn't develop. Like, it's a completely different issue. They
Yes.
kept them healthy and they still didn't work out. That's the frustration. But I don't want to put the sins of the parent onto the child. I don't want to put the sins on the previous, coaching staff onto the current one. They came in. This is what they inherited. And they've had literally, 0 games to show what they can do that actually matter. So, the fact that Lynch didn't develop at all for those 3 years, that's not on them. I'm still hopeful they can salvage something from all of these guys. But at this point, you have to hope you have to hope that they can do something with the next wave of pitchers, the Mazzucatos and Cadernas, because these guys, even if they can work it out, like you said, they're already halfway to free agency. And in the case of Brad Keller, he's going to be there in 5 months.
Yeah, but you get my point. That
Yeah.
they get nothing. Like when he goes down, it's like there's no quality production from Daniel Lynch at all. And we're burning through service time, and now more service time being thrown away while he sits on the DL, right? Which is to be expected, but you'd like some quality innings before that happens, and they just don't get it. They never seem to get it when it comes along. All right. So you're still optimistic about it. What about the roster changes? How do you tweak what you think, or what do you think they will tweak now that Lynch goes out?
Well, I mean, even before he got hurt, I mean, it looked like he was going to be the 5th starter, right? I mean, I think it looks like they actually announced it. Greinke, Jordan Lyles, and Brad Keller to open the season. Brady Singer will be the 4th starter, not the 4th starter, but he starts 4th, right? Because he's still ramping up from not pitching basically at all in the World Baseball Classic. But he went out there, he looked sharp the other day in his most recent start. And obviously he's in the rotation. But those are the 4 guys. At this point, the 5th starter, I'm assuming it's Chris Bubich, unless they put Yarbrough in that role to start the year. There's only 1 or 2 roster spots I feel like that are not confirmed now. They've sort of the bullpen has pretty much been set. They sent down Josh Stomont, which was a big surprise. Although I think kind of a nice, a pleasant surprise in the sense that Stomont was outstanding in 2020 and 2021, but he was pretty terrible last year. He's never thrown strikes. And in spring training, I think he walked 5 guys in 8 innings. Not, terrible, but not progress either. And the fact that even though he was one of the world's best relievers for a couple of years, they are emphasizing this raid the zone philosophy. They're putting some meat behind that. It's one thing to say you got to throw strikes. Another thing to send down a guy who's on pure talent is one of the best relievers in your bullpen because he's not throwing strikes. So him being sent down, I agree with. The one I'm really sad about is Richard Lovelady not making the team. He's had a phenomenal spring. And again, some of my frustration there, I don't want to put too much of it onto the current coaching staff because my issue there is he should have been in the bullpen for the last 3 years. He didn't get along. He was one of the first guys who didn't get along with Cal Eldred. And I think they buried him for a while. Then he got hurt. But he came back from his Tommy John last year, late in the year in September, looked great in Omaha, looks great this year. But I think what they ultimately decided was if you have options, you're going to the minor leagues because they are going to use the last 2 spots in the bullpen as just a constant option shuttle. I think the guys who open the season in the 7 and 8 spots in the bullpen, you're probably looking at maybe Taylor Clark and Colin Snyder at this point, but I could absolutely see Stomont, Lovelady, Jose Quas, all guys shuttling up and down from Omaha and extending that bullpen to 9 or 10 guys. That's the Rays way of doing things, and it makes sense. The rest of the bullpen is pretty set. I mean, you've got Chapman and Amir Garrett and Ryan Yarbrough from the left side. You've got Barlow, Dylan Coleman, and we're hoping a rejuvenated Carlos Hernandez from the right side. That's a lot of power arms in that bullpen. I mean, Yarbrough is a swing guy, but the rest of these guys can bring it. And so there is definitely some upside here. This could be a sneaky good bullpen in the major leagues. But it's not just that you don't just want 3 or 4 good guys. You want depth. And I'm hoping that what we're seeing with the final couple roster spots is they're just going to bring in fresh arm after fresh arm that'll allow them to take some of the pressure off the starters. And I'm slightly optimistic that this will be an above average bullpen this year.
Yeah, I am too. I like the bullpen. I like the pieces that are there, and I expect them to trade pieces. Like we'll get more into that here in a little bit, but I think this is going to be something where they're an active club. I think we're going to see the transactional part come to fruition, and this to me, Daniel Lynch going down gives them a chance to be creative. I would like to see an opener at some point for this team. I'm not sure why. I think the Rays got better with their starting pitching. That's one of the reasons they got away from it. Well, that's not in effect here. So I want to see what happens. I want to see them be a little bit more creative, and maybe this will help open the door because they're not like, well, we need to get Daniel Lynch innings. They'll open the doors to it. Let's talk about our predictions. All right. You'll start with our records. You want to go first or second? You want to trade off, or you want to go?
I'll go first on this one. Well,
Okay.
I'll go first, and then we'll go back and forth.
Okay.
So my prediction for the Royals, if I had to, put a number to it, gun to my head, my median prediction: 77 and 85. Does that laugh mean what I think? That's why I wanted to go first. I had a feeling we would be close on this, which is good. I think they're going to be better. That's a 12-win improvement. They're going to be sizably better. They're going to be respectable. And that's a huge compliment I'm paying to the organization when you consider they haven't really upgraded the talent. All right, they haven't brought in what have they brought in since last year? Again, Jordan Lyles, Aroldis Chapman, Ryan Yarbrough. I'm trying to think on the hitting. Franmil Reyes. I mean, Franmil Reyes is probably the most important hitter. They got a couple of non-roster guys who might make the roster. Brett Beatty might make the roster. They haven't brought in a lot, and yet I still think they'll be better because I think the coaching is that much better, and I think I do believe in that young hitting talent last year. So 12 wins is a sizable improvement, but I take it with a grain of salt, I guess, because last year I projected them to win 82 games, and that looks incredibly stupid now. But I feel like I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid, and yet I'm still projecting improvement.
Well, and that's what I wonder. What am I doing here? Because I'm at the exact same 77 and 85, and I'm actually happy that you're right there because I respect your opinion. And I, like you, had him with a winning record last year, and I think that was wishful thinking. And I wonder if I'm overcorrecting here. I was very high on the club. I liked how they were playing, not just the wins that they were getting in spring training, but I was like, all right, am I just going to keep lobbing that out, and eventually one year they'll have a winning record, and I'll say, "Ta-da! I nailed it." I do still have some frustrations. I don't know about Melendez in the outfield. I don't know how good the defense is going to be. I do think there's going to be parts of this offense that are really good. I've got a statistical prediction I'm going to make later that's based upon actually them not being good in certain spots, which I'll explain. But I do like some of the pieces that are there. I mean, I think they ought to hit pretty good, relatively speaking. And I expect them to pitch better just off the coaching they're getting and the approach that they're going to take. So, I'm with you. 77 and 85, but I could certainly see them, in a perfect world. I think you can always play up 10 games from what you really are, and you can play down like 20, 25. Guys start being shelved when they're hurt and so on and so forth when it starts going to hell in a handbasket. I don't think they're as bad as they looked last year. So I think this is a team that could play up towards 85, 86, 87 wins. If everything went right, it probably won't. 77 and 85 feels good for me. And it cashes my over 68.5 wins comfortably as well. So I just, hopefully it's not just me rooting for my prediction,
Sure.
that has me hanging that number up there.
Here's what I'll add. I actually got a text from our mutual friend Joe Sheehan when he was doing his predictions league-wide. And it's always good to get a reality check from a national guy because he's not just throwing out one number. He has to put out 30 numbers and make sure they actually add up to a 500 record. You can't predict everybody to win 85, 90 games and make the playoffs. It doesn't work that way. And he was sending it to me just as almost like a reality check. And he projected 76 and 86. And when I told him my projection of 77, 85, we were both kind of surprised. He was surprised that I wasn't more optimistic, drinking the Kool-Aid more. I was surprised he wasn't more pessimistic. We're usually the gap between what I think the Royals will do and what he thinks the Royals will do. He's usually more in the range of 10 to 12 wins. And I'm sad to say he's usually right. But the fact that we kind of see things the same way, it makes me feel better that I'm not just being a homer. That's actually a very realistic possibility. But the one thing I will add,
Joe's at 75,
76.
76.
Yeah.
I would say this, though. It's hard to lose 97 games.
Are you sure? The
like,
Royals make it look easy.
I know, but the sport brings you back
I know.
500. And so in some ways, I think when I hear Joe there, I think, national guys and analytics people compress everything down here, right? That's where it's supposed to happen if you do it 1,000,000 times, 1,000 times, right? Everything's here.
But Joe
They
will
never-
not. Joe
they never-
doesn't mince his words. I mean, Joe's got. Let's put it this way: he's got the A's losing 106 games. He's got the Nationals losing 108. So, like, he's not afraid to, plant his flag down on teams being really bad.
I digress. If he's that, because generally speaking, they'll like when you see the predictions come out, when you see win totals, like in baseball, nobody's losing 100, right? That's how because that's an outlier. But outliers are actually the norm. You just have to figure out what's going to happen. And one is, if the team's bad, it'll just end up getting worse because they'll be bad. Bad teams are unathletic, which means they get hurt more. Guys who get hurt stay hurt when they're losing because there's no point in bringing them back early. They don't get surgeries or injuries they can play through. They don't. They get surgery because what the hell? What does it matter now? And it snowballs. And so that's the part that they don't factor in that he clearly does factor in. That's why he's best.
But the one thing that Kevin, I'll add to that is when I say 77 wins, there are some very long tails on that. And by that, I mean, the distribution, the standard deviation here is quite high, which is a good thing because there is still absolutely the possibility this team could not hit your over of 68 wins. And, there is a disaster scenario here where it turns out the coaching isn't any better. Or the talent never was, the talent that was so bad last year is just unsalvageable. And they go and they lose 97 games or even more because they didn't add any talent, right? There is definitely a worst case scenario that is, worse than we are expecting. There is also a best case scenario here, though. And we're going to talk about the miracle season kind of phenomenon, the possibility here. There are definitely some markers on this team when you look back at miracle teams from the past that the Royals possess. And so there is also a possibility if it turns out that the coaching does make a huge difference and so many of the pitchers that we thought were just bad pitchers turns out were just being poorly served and make improvements on the one hand. And on the other hand, the young hitting talent that we saw just has a natural progression that you would expect rookie hitters to make from rookies to sophomores. There is a 90 win scenario in play here. Certainly, what you said, 85 to 87, which functionally speaking means you're in a playoff race all year round, which means they will be one of the biggest stories in baseball in September. That is
if
absolutely
they reach their ceiling.
Yes, but the point is that there are a bunch of teams. For a team that went 65 and 97 the year before to make the playoffs, that is still quite a rare thing. And I just think that there is a scenario here. I think it's more likely than people realize. When you look, I don't gamble. I do this purely for academic purposes. But if you look at the odds for the Royals to make the playoffs, like they are, I've seen anywhere from plus 1,100 to plus 1,600. Like those are 10 to 1 to 15 to 1 odds.
Those are 11 or 16 to 1, and that means that they're actually longer. That's just what they'll pay.
Right, exactly.
So at 11 to 1, it means they're 15.
Right. Exactly.
16 to 1. At 16 to 1, it means they think they're 20, 22 to 1.
I mean, they're basically saying 5 to 8%, which a lot of, I think if you look at Pacoda projections, if you look at Fangraphs projection, I believe the Fangraphs has their playoff odds this year. Yeah, somewhere like 4 or 5%. I just feel like the long tail is favorable for the Royals. That there's probably a 10 to 15% chance this team surprises everyone and makes the playoffs.
Yeah,
and if they do, that's gonna be a great story.
I'll say this: I like the Kansas City Royals. This from Ali Satchad. The Kansas City Royals, always a standard deviation from disaster. And this one here, they've gone 500 4 times in 29 years. 4 out of 29, they've done nothing to get the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's a fair comment, right? I know
Absolutely
somewhat
fair.
flippant and somewhat comedic, but I think it's a fair comment. I'll go first on player of the year.
Okay.
I'm going to take Vinny Pasquantino
Okay.
because I know you are too, right?
No, actually, I'm not.
Oh, wow.
No,
Okay.
I love Vinny, and he'll get his love
shocked.
from me. But no, I'm gonna go chalk. But go ahead.
You're going to go Bobby Witt, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, I think Vinny is going to put it all together. I think his on base, I think is going to be the difference. I'm not sold. I think Bobby Witt Jr. we may watch. I'm not convinced that the shortstop play is going to be any better. I don't understand why. I mean, I think if you can ball out with a glove, you can ball out. And I don't understand all the different things I think are just excuses for why he didn't play well. He's not that good. And then what about the Royals' development of players to this point makes you think that somebody's going to suddenly get better? Who's gotten better defensively for this club? And so I think that is going to weigh. I think we'll be talking about Bobby Witt Jr. moving to third or the outfield in the next offseason. And I think Vinny Pasquantino will put up numbers all year long, and I think he'll win the award.
I certainly am not going to say you're wrong because I love Vinny. I think he's going to be the best hitter on this team. I'm going to go with Bobby Witt just because, just as you said, it's hard to lose 97 games. It's hard to be as bad defensively, at least according to the defensive metrics, as Bobby Witt was last year. I mean, I'm the one.
There's a lot of noise in the defensive metrics.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for on when it comes to this particular subject, right? I mean, Bobby Witt was, depending on the metric used, something like 20 runs below average as a defender last year. But if he can get that up to even 5 to 10 runs below average, he's going to improve by a win just from defensive regression. Then you factor in he's 22. He'll be, I guess, 23? Yeah, he turns 23 in June. He's going to be a second full year in the major leagues. If he just gets a little bit better, particularly when it comes to plate discipline, if he does nothing more than chase pitches out of the strike zone 10% less, his batting average will go up, his on base will go way up. He'll get more meatballs because he'll be ahead in the count more. He'll get more power. His 722 OPS could easily go up 100 points, and that's what I'm betting on. That he's going to have an OPS in the 820 to 850 range, and be a below average but acceptable defender at an important position, which makes him a 4.5 win player. I think Vinny will be probably very close at 3.5 to 4 wins. As a first baseman, you have to really rake to do that, and I think he will. But I'm just going to go with Bobby Witt. But I think those two guys are clearly the two best guys on the team.
Okay, I'll give you the honors on pitcher of the year.
So I'm going chalk here. I know this March Madness may be a sign that I shouldn't be, but I'll go chalk and go with Brady Singer. I just think that what we saw last year was mostly real. 150 strikeouts and 35 walks. If I know nothing else about a pitcher but that, I'm riding with that pitcher. The biggest problem for him last year was simply just the number of innings. He threw 153. But I mean, he was in the minors briefly, and they were, very cautious with him because obviously they were playing for nothing all year. I think he'll get up to 180 innings this year. 180 innings, be an ERA probably around where he was last year, 3.25. I think that makes him, probably a top 20 pitcher in the American League, about a 4-win guy. I think he'll be the best pitcher on the roster.
Okay. I too have Brady Singer. I wanted to be crafty and take Zach Greinke, or, I was looking through. I'm like, oh, am I going to go with a reliever? I actually think every reliever is a candidate to be traded. So
right.
I think that makes it really hard.
If the pitcher of the year is a reliever, you've had a bad year. Like that's a pretty good indicator. Let's hope it's not a reliever.
Yeah. By this. Welcome to Happy Host, most depressing chat ever.
I thought we were being optimistic. Jeez.
I thought so too. I think you're doing so bad, but I guess not. All right. Listen, I can't find anybody else. Right? I mean, they're going to teach Jordan Lyles a new pitch, and he's going to go to another level. Zach Greinke's going to, find the fountain of youth. I don't see it. I don't see where. Listen, I'll almost say. We almost say it's a disaster if he doesn't, because where's your optimism? Like there's nobody. There's Bubic. No. Like Jonathan Bolin, I mean, you'd almost have to say somebody comes out of nowhere from the minor leagues and steals it, right?
There's one other possibility, which I'll get to when we get to our bold predictions.
Bold and daring predictions.
Yep.
Okay, I like it. All right, I'll take the surprise player of the year.
Okay.
I think there's, Brad Keller would be an easy one to go with this one because, he's had some, last time out, 5 innings, 9 Ks. Was it no runs? I think 1 hit, something like that. So that's one I thought about going there, but I'm actually going to take Nicky Lopez. I think by the end of the year, Nicky Lopez may be the starting shortstop for this team. The Rays, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, value defense. I think Matt Quatrero will as well. And if I'm right about Vinny Pasquantino winning the award, 1, because he hits well, but 2, because Bobby Witt Jr. is just not that good at short, then I think he may find himself back at the starting shortstop, and Bobby Witt goes back over to third. I think they want to play Bobby Witt Jr. all year at short, and I think if he gives them any reason to do it, he's going to get to play short all year. But I also think there's a scenario where it's just not any better. And 3 months in, if he's kicking the ball around and it starts to affect his hitting, then I think they're going to have to say, all right, we have to do something here. Most people think, and I'll give credit to David Lesky that, or was it you? I think it was David said to me on the radio show that he thinks they're playing him at short because that's where Bobby Witt Jr. wants to play. Well, if that's the case, then there's going to be a limit to that rope. Like they're going to want him to produce. Okay, that's where you want to be, son. Here you go. It's your spot. And I've talked to enough people. I do think that they really want him to prove himself at shortstop. So they're giving him everything. And I think in an effort to be like, okay, you had it all. There are no excuses. You're there every single day. We write your name in the lineup. We're not moving you around. Here it is. You had a whole spring training at short. You had the whole year. And if it's not going well, then I think it gets pretty easy to say, okay, we got to move you someplace else. And for this franchise, frankly, the cost, that may be the best thing to do. So for all those reasons, I see, and I'm threading a needle a little bit, and I am rooting for my prediction because I really like Nicky Lopez, the guy, and I'd really like to see it work out. So this is the path I've finagled to get Nicky Lopez to be my surprise player of the year. He bounces back. He hits like 285 with the, decent on base, but plays Gold Glove defense wherever they ask him to play. Where's yours?
Quite possible. Yeah. Interestingly enough, my surprise player is basically his main rival for playing time to start the year, and that's Michael Massey at second base. I really feel like, for all we've talked about with Witt and Pasquantino and even MJ Melendez, Massey is the 4th rookie from last year who doesn't get enough love. I love players like him who do a little bit of everything well. There's no one defining stat that, he's not going to contend for a batting title. He's not a huge power hitter. He's not going to steal 50 bases, but he can hit for a decent average. He has some pop. He has decent speed. He's a good defender, and he plays an important defensive position at second base. You add up the sum of all of those things in one player can get you to 3 or 4 wins without, numbers that are going to knock your socks off. But I think, you had 243 last year, 307 on base, 376 slug. Doesn't sound great. He was a little bit below average as a hitter, but if you extrapolate his full season, his 52 games to a full season, he would have been a 2.5 win player. It's basically a league average player. I think if he takes even a little bit of a step forward, he'll hit like 270 with 15 home runs and, average to above average defense at second base. I think he's going to play every day. I think he's going to win that job. And I think at the end of the year, he's going to be one of the guys you just don't notice until the end of the year. And you look at the stats, you're like, this guy was one of the three or four best hitters on the entire roster. And I really feel like he could be a very integral part of whatever playoff contending run over the next 3 or 4 years that the Royals have.
10 strikeouts and 39 at bats. Did hit 3 home runs in the spring. The only thing I like everything you said there. The only thing I'll say is, what'd you say? Average to above average? Like this is another guy. There's another guy. Oh, he's a Gold Glove. He won the equivalent of the minor league Gold Glove, and now we're down to average.
Well, I'm being conservative there, but also honestly, when he won the Gold Glove in the minor leagues, I think even the Royals were a little bit surprised. Like he had a good defensive reputation. That was a nice little trophy you could put on top of it. I haven't heard anybody say that while he was in the minor leagues, he was like an absolutely elite defensive second baseman, but it was the sort of thing where he makes all the plays he's supposed to make, and is not very mistake prone. So I'm not going to ding the Royals. If he's average, that's fine. I think he could be average at least, and maybe a little bit above.
You have the honor on the bus player. Can I take a guess?
I'll just say the name. I'm going to say Aroldis Chapman.
Really? That's not where I thought you were going.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there's so many. Look, I could easily say Hunter Dozier, but bust implies that you have expectations to begin with. I have no expectations for Hunter Dozier. So this is, to me, bust is a guy whose actual performance minus expected performance is the most negative. Let's put it that way. And I just feel like, the Royals actually brought in Aroldis Chapman thinking he's going to be an important, eighth inning guy, if not the closer by, at some point in the season. And, I see a guy who's 35 years old, wasn't really wanted by the Yankees anymore. You just from a pure personality standpoint, got himself out of New York. And, after being a pretty good command pitcher for the last 5-6 years, his walk rate in 2021 and 2022 was over 6 walks per 9 innings. And he's going to an organization that, until 3 months ago, was, the worst in baseball in terms of getting guys to throw strikes. So, and he may just be done. I hope I'm wrong. He was touching 99 in spring training, but the combination of his performance decline and how he'll fit into that clubhouse, I just feel like they're going to look back and say, yeah, this signing didn't work out.
5 2/3, 6 hits, 3 walks, 11 Ks.
The strikeouts are nice. The walks not so nice, but the stuff is there, and I'm sure that's what the Royals were betting on when they signed him. And hopefully he can put it together long enough for them to trade him at the deadline, like you said. But I just don't know that's going to be the case.
I thought about going to Aroldis Chapman. I also thought about Dylan Coleman. Everyone always loves Dylan Coleman, and he's always walking the world. And I thought, I thought about going there. But I actually had a name written down before this season, and that's Daniel Lynch. And he's hurt, and so I was like, well, do I replace him now that he's hurt? It's not really fair. And I'm like, no, I'm going to leave him there because I'm not seeing it. Like I don't get what's going on, and it's puzzling to me because Keith Law had him as the top pitching prospect out of that class all along. He really liked his stuff and everything that he had, and I don't get it. I don't understand why at that size and why they're not able to get more from him. But I don't see why he's going to be anything more than 6'7" lefty Brad Keller. Like I don't get why it's going to work. And now that he's hurt, I'll leave it there because this was a big year, and being available is a big part of your ability. Availability is a big part of your ability. That's for sure. That's part of it with Lynch. So I'll leave it with him. By the way, the folks that are available to get rid of all of your parking lot problems, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. If your business has any issues with your parking lot, free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Make sure you tell them you heard about them here on the Kauffman Corner Podcast. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Again, online at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. Rany, let's get to our bold predictions.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll start us off.
You'll start us off. Okay.
Bold prediction number 1. The Royals will have multiple players finish in the top 15 in the MVP balloting this season. And by multiple, I'm specifically referring to Bobby Witt and Vinny Pasquantino. Okay. I think, I really think Vinny, you picked him as the best player and I didn't, but I think Vinny is absolutely going to rake. I think he's going to flirt with a 900 OPS. To the point where I think that, even as a first baseman, he's going to get some MVP down ballot votes. And yet I think Bobby Witt will have a slightly better year. And Bobby Witt certainly has the hype behind him and the national reputation already. So I think that it'll be easy for him to get some votes too. I don't think either one's going to win, but in top 15 may not sound like much, but
it's
go back and look at MVP voting over the last 30 years and see how often a Royal was in the top 15. It's incredibly rare.
It is freaking giant, and you could get like 100 or maybe even 200, 300 to 1 on that actually happening. I mean, when you think, no, listen, and that we're looking for bold and daring predictions, right? So that's exactly what this is. I want to underscore. I'm with you. If like people think this is bold, they're not a winning team. So who's going to vote for? Or they're not supposed to be a winning team. So who the hell's going to? They better get to 77 wins, right there, just to get Rany's guys on the board in the MVP discussion. And then think about it. There's 15 American League teams, right? Generally speaking, the really good ones like have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, right? They have Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. Take your pick, Garrett Cole, pitcher. So to get 2 into the top 15 would be phenomenal. And I'd almost say that the Royals can't have a losing record if that would occur. So
yeah, I mean that's sort of, we're being bold, but I mean if in a bold universe, yes, the Royals are above 500.
But if they even got multiple votes, I would give you that one. Like, you don't even have to get them to the top 15. I love the prediction. I hope you're right. I will make this prediction: the Royals will have their most active trade season in memory. I think that JJ Piccolo has sat there wanting to make moves, and Dayton didn't want to make him. And I think he is going to rock and fire at the deadline. I think anything that's not nailed down is going to go. I think the fact that he sent out some of the guys he sent out shows that he's not afraid to play the numbers game, and that might mean some unhappy players. Like, do you think Josh Stammont's happy being in the minor leagues? And I don't know that would have happened with Dayton Moore, right? And so,
which is a good thing, I think.
Yes, for sure. Well, because what the hell? I'll say it again just to reiterate it, and if anybody's new to the Kauffman Corner podcast, what the hell has loving their players more than everybody else really gotten them? Like, they want to say that's the reason why they won the World Series, why they got to back-to-back World Series. But, we've had 4 winning seasons, right, is what they've had in 29 years. And one of those wasn't even with this group, right? So there's 3 winning seasons in 16 years of the Dayton Moore era. Things have to change. I think they're going to change. And I think one of the ways they're going to change is they are going to be really active. I think Chapman will go. I think Barlow will go. I think Keller will go. I think anything not nailed down will go.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, they certainly have the inventory to make that happen, right? They have a lot of players, especially pitchers, who are on, in the final year of their contracts or close to it, So yeah, the opportunity will be there. So yeah, I think it's a bold prediction, but I don't think it's incredibly bold. I think it's actually quite likely, if they're not in contention, that, JJ will make some moves. And if he doesn't, frankly, then he deserves to be roasted for it, because they should move those guys.
Yeah, for sure. All right. What do you got next?
So number 2, this one, hey, we're being bold here. So I'm gonna be bold. Brad Keller, who until recently I was knocking as a guy that they probably shouldn't even bring back for this season, will have his best season since at least his rookie year.
Okay.
Right. He was one of the all-time great Rule 5 picks in terms of success. In fact, I did an article making the case that he had the best rookie season ever for a Rule 5 pick. He was worth over 4 wins in his rookie season.
To be bold and daring, this has to be his best season.
I think it might. I don't. My concern on looking at it now, if he is better than he is as a rookie, he might be the world's best player over Bobby Witt and Vinny. I think he could be up there. This is bold, but the reason I'm saying this, he's got a curveball now, and this is a guy who his success has been somewhat mystifying when he was successful, which obviously he hasn't been the last 2 years. But his success was mystifying because his pitch metrics, he only had 2 pitches. They didn't grade out as particularly good, but his fastball and slider were so difficult to tell apart. And he had something what we call the seam shifted wake, where the spin on his pitches did not correspond to the way they move. So when a batter, how batters can see, a lot of batters subconsciously can sort of see the spin on a pitch, and that's how they can determine ahead of time which way it's going to move. And for whatever reason, the grip he had on the pitches was such that the ball moved differently than hitters are trained to expect. So when you see that red dot, they call it the slider, the slider is being thrown because there's a specific spin. His pitch moved completely opposite to what hitters are trained to, and I think that's what made him successful. So he had the ability to be successful without a third pitch. Now he's got a curveball, and as you said, he struck out 9 guys in 5 innings. yeah, it's spring training, but Brad Keller doesn't strike guys out. That's never been his game, right? He gets guys out with ground balls and contact. And again, new pitching coach, new philosophy. Brad Keller has been there for he's the longest tenured guy on the pitching staff, I believe. He's been there the entirety of the Cal Eldred era. Now he's got a new pitching coach. That's my bold prediction. He's actually going to be in the rotation all season long, 180 innings. He's going to give you an ERA around 3.5, and it's going to be his best year.
I will give you my next one, which is not quite as bold as Eric's. Eric's says bold prediction: 2 players with 40 homers. I'm just taking for the first time ever in Royals history, they have 2 with 30 home runs. And Eric, if you're right with 40, more power to you, man, because that is really bold. The Royals have never had 2 guys have 30 home runs in a season. And I think with Pasquantino, Witt, Salvi, Reyes, MJ Melendez, even I think there's a quantity of players, and I think if enough of them are going, they should feed off each other. And that's where, if you want to get excited about this team, you get excited about the lineup, maybe having a hint of that, Damon, Dive, Beltran, Randa, just in all Sweeney being in that mix. They were all there, and they were all able to. There was always guys on base and always good bats coming up behind them. That will be one of the keys, I think, for this ball club. And so I will make the prediction that even though they've never had more than one, and they've only had, off the top of my head, what are they, 10, 11, 12 maybe, 30 home run seasons? I looking up pretty quick here, but
yeah, I'm running some numbers. You have me intrigued now. 5, 10, 14 total.
14? That really?
Yeah.
That many?
Well, actually, technically, 1985 they had Balboni and Brett had 30, but that led to a world championship. So,
okay.
Yeah. Let's say more than 2 players with more than 30, because Brett had exactly 30 that year.
Yeah.
So let's keep your prediction in place. 2 players will hit more than 30 home runs.
I'll do that. I'll up it to more than 30. Yeah, they did. You're right. I was like, I just knew off the top of my head. Didn't have it. I didn't even bother to look at that. But yeah, that should be known. Is that right? 14. Good Lord.
Well, I feel like 4 or 5 of
By
those.
the way, that's not many.
5 years. Yeah, no, it's not a lot, and I mean, a lot of that's changed recently. I mean, obviously, the Balboni had the record forever until Mustakas broke it, and then Salvador Perez and Jorge Soler both hit 48. So some of those have come just in the last 5 years. But I agree with what you're saying, that there's potential multiple guys. Let's put it this way: I was looking it up. Only once in Royals history have 3 guys hit 25 home runs. That was in 2017. Hosmer, Mustakas, and Salvi all hit 25. I'm actually curious: has any team ever had 4 players with 20? I bet you no.
Oh yes. A Royals team or any major league team?
Royals team.
Okay.
Actually, no. That same team had Brandon Moss. Brandon Moss hit 20 home runs for the 2017 Royals. I do not remember that. Okay, but I think that this Royals team could absolutely be up there. Melendez, Witt, Pasquantino, right there. Those guys, I think all 3 of those guys would be disappointed if they don't hit 20.
Yeah.
And then Franmil Reyes, if he plays every day, there could be Salvi, I haven't even mentioned Salvador Perez. So they'll be interesting. Could this team set the franchise record for home runs?
Yeah. It could. Yeah, for sure.
That could be the other bold prediction. So
okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. It's a good one. All right, now my last.
I want to put out Kauffman 50 steals for Bobby Witt Jr. That's a
with the new bases and the new rules that limit pickoff throws.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, this speed is in.
Michael also had 200 Ks for Brad Keller.
Okay, now that's just crazy. I mean, let's not go overboard, guys.
They were bold and daring. Michael's getting with the team. You're all right there. You're all right there, Michael.
All right. So my last bold prediction.
Yes.
And this one it's gonna have a minor league theme to it. I'm predicting that Nick Lofton will be playing every day for the Royals by September. I don't know where. Now, one of the nice things about Nick Lofton is he can kind of fit in multiple places. He's come up as a shortstop. I don't think he'll be a shortstop. Could be at second base. I think it's more likely he'll be in center field. And the wild card position is he could end up being at third base, because I do think they'll be looking for a third baseman before too long. But I really feel like Nick Lofton, he's close to the majors. He struggled a little bit in Omaha last year, but was great in Double A. He came into the camp with a lot more muscle on his body. He driving the ball. He's hit some home runs in spring training. I like his all around game. That kind of a Whit Merrifield-esque game, and I think he's going to be playing for the Royals every day, maybe at multiple positions, but he'll be in the lineup every day in September.
All right, I will go with my final bold prediction that Asa Lacy pitches in the big leagues this year. He is completely lost and gone and out of sight, out of mind, which hopefully will be exactly what he needs, is to be off the radar screen. And they were confident. Now, listen, the same people that were confident about Asa Lacy when I was talking to folks at spring training were also confident that look out, wait till you see Jackson Kowar. And what we saw out of Jackson Kowar is what we always see out of Jackson Kowar. So that makes me a little bit nervous. But the pedigree is that this is an elite pitcher. There are new people getting a look, a new approach. Some of the same people, but I'm going to take my chances on Asa Lacy getting it together, and he comes up and is pitching in September, maybe even late August, as a power reliever. After the Royals have emptied the clip on the trade market, Asa Lacy comes up and gets his feet wet as a reliever in the big leagues sometime this year.
I like it. It's bold and just on the edge of crazy, but actually plausible, right? Because what you're describing, the stuff is there, right? The stuff has always been there. You've got new coaching, and we have like an explanation for his complete lack of command, which was the back injury, coming back from injury. If he had been completely healthy and thrown like that, then you'd be much more concerned that this is just a mental, the synapses between his brain and his arm are just not connecting. And we've just seen historically pitchers, it's hard to come back from Steve Blass disease, right? Yeah. That's a rare thing. Here, there have been pitchers who have had crazy wildness like he did last year that was sort of injury induced, who have come back from it. So it would be, that would be one of the best signs of possible for this, not just for the season, but for the organization. If Asa Lacy makes it to the major leagues this year,
sure.
If they can solve him, then they can solve a lot of things. And if he's throwing enough strikes to make the major leagues, he's going to be a good pitcher. I don't think that's really in doubt. So yeah, I'm not courageous enough to make that bold a stance myself, but I like it. It's a good one.
Speaking of solving issues, that's what Gann Asphalt and Concrete does. And they're one of the fastest growing companies in Kansas City. Plus, they're hiring all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. You can check them out online at GannAsphalt.com for more info. That's GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. That is Gann Asphalt and Concrete, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Let's talk a little bit about the American League Central. How do you think that shapes up this year?
I'm kind of going chalky again. I feel like, the Guardians are the best. Like, it's the Guardians and the Twins, to me, are the two best teams. I'm going to go with the Guardians because they just have a history of getting above expectation performances from players, particularly from pitchers. So if the talent levels is equivalent, I'm going to go with the team that's proven they can take talent and make them better. So I'm putting those two in the first tier, but for the first and second, I'll put the White Sox third. And then I think the Royals will finish ahead of the Tigers this year. We feel somewhat optimistic about the Royals. I feel no optimism about the Tigers right now. They have new management in place, maybe down the line. So yeah, I see the Royals in fourth place, but the one thing I'll say is this feels like a compressed division. There's no super team here. And, all five teams could end up being within 15 to 20 games of each other by the end of the year.
I was trying to go back and see. I just real quick wanted to get okay, yeah, here's one. Oddsmakers make the White Sox the favorite to win the AL Central in 22. Right? The only thing I'm going to change for you is I'm going to put the White Sox in second and the Twins in third. Guardians, White Sox, Twins, Royals, Tigers. I bring that up because I always like to look back. What were they the year before, and did teams overachieve? Like, so if you got a team, everyone thinks whatever last year was is the entire story of what a team is, but actually multiple years go into making it up. So if you look at last year, a team won 92 games, they were predicted to be 75. I start looking for reasons to back them up and say, okay, they had the kind of that not that they're going to go back to 75 wins, but hey, maybe a regression is in the cards, right? They overachieved. Last year, I think the White Sox underachieved. I like a lot of the pieces that are there. So I'm going to take and the Twins just always seem to disappoint. And if you took the odds the way they're up there, actually the Tigers are actually favored just a little bit ahead of the Royals. The Royals are predicted at least on one of the odds. I was looking at. But so I'll move it around a little bit.
We're optimists here, guys.
Yes.
All you people in the comment section saying that we're Debbie Downers. We're putting the Royals ahead of the Tigers. So that's homerism right there for you.
Yeah, this is the exact same thing that I'm going. Same thing that Curtis has. I'm going Guardians, White Sox, Twins, Royals, Tigers, and I do think the compressed nature of it. I don't know that there's anyone that can run away. Although there is much better depth of starting pitching with the Guardians. I really do think it's 3 and then the other 2. Right? Like
on paper, yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Because the starting pitching is just so different. With the White Sox being the starting pitching that can be electric or on the DL the whole time, right? Like if they're healthy, there's a lot of high quality pedigree in the pitchers. There just isn't a lot of high quality consistency or health.
See, I think the one other story, the sort of the hidden story about this division as a whole is just how little talent all the teams added in free agency. I mean, that's, to me, when we're going to get into the whole possibility of like a miracle season here. One of the things that makes me optimistic that it's at least possible is that none of the Guardians, the Twins, the White Sox, all 3 teams had the ability to go out and make themselves a lot better in free agency. None of them did. I mean, the Twins, the big thing is they signed Carlos Correa, who might, if he's healthy, and obviously if he was completely healthy, the Giants or the Mets would have actually finished the contract that they had agreed to with him. But if healthy, he's one of the best players in the game. But they had him last year. Like, they're just holding serve there. They didn't add anything more. The best player the White Sox added might have been Andrew Benintendi. And God love him, but like if that's not a huge needle moving signing to me.
But there's a lot of guys that didn't, and I know that they lost Abreu too. I mean that's something to add into the White Sox mix, and he's just a perennial run producer. But I do think a lot of guys really underachieved in the White Sox, and I think
that's the argument to make that they'll be better, right? But I'm just saying they didn't add much talent. It has to come from within because they didn't add a lot of talent.
And Tony La Russa was just an absolute wet blanket over that whole thing. And Pedro Grifol, I think if nothing else, will release the pressure. Maybe he doesn't end up being a guy that the moves don't wow you. I don't know. I have no idea what he's going to be as a tactician and managing his bullpen and his pitching staff and all those kind of things. We'll have to wait and see. But I think he will absolutely release the pressure that was there, and so I think the White Sox are a little bit craftier.
That's certainly the argument to make for them being better, but they have more ground to make up. I mean, the Guardians were the best team last year, and I think they will be this year. But who did they add? I guess Josh Naylor, is probably the best player that they added. So again, in the Guardians, it's year after year. They are always good, and yet you always think, God, if they'd add one more player, they could be a truly great team, and they're not willing to spend the money. And as a baseball fan, it's frustrating. As a Royals fan, it's an opportunity that, while I think they're the best team in the division, there's no Dodgers, there's no Astros, there's no Yankees even in this division. And you can't say enough about how important that is for the Royals' chances that there are some good teams. There are no great teams in this division.
Yeah, I guess right. And I'll say this, losing Abreu to play Andrew Vaughn, I think it's about actually having the payroll and all those kind of things. And then Vaughn goes to play first base.
Right. I was going to say the defensive upgrade there, getting him out of left field. And I mean, Andrew Vaughn, like there's the 2 top draft picks first who are basically drafted just for their bat in the last couple of years. Spencer Torkelson with the Tigers, Andrew Vaughn with the White Sox. Torkelson could be a bust. Like he has not shown much ability to hit. And he has to hit because he's not a good defender. But Andrew Vaughn, I actually still think is going to be a good player, a really good player.
I think he's going to have a big offensive year, not just because he's on one of my keepers on my fantasy baseball team.
Of course he is.
Actually happened. All right, let's talk about the truly positive side of things here, Rany. You did some digging, right?
I did some
miracle teams.
Some fun.
No expectations, and they deliver big and go to the playoffs. How do these Royals resemble like some of these miracle teams?
So look, it's opening week. This is our last show before opening day. If we can't be optimistic and dream big now, when can we? Right. So I felt like let's talk about it, because I truly do believe when I say, the long tail here, that the Royals could be almost anything. And while that means they could be a disaster, I do think people in the sport as a whole underrate the Royals' chances. If you had to pick one team that is projected to lose 90 games or more that might actually make the playoffs, I think the Royals should be on that short list. I don't see a scenario where the Nationals make the playoffs, or the Tigers for that matter. There is a scenario with the Royals. We've talked about those reasons here. So I decided to look up some of my favorite miracle teams from years past. The 84 Cubs and the 2008 Rays stand out to me for a very specific reason, which is that while they were considered a miracle team by the industry as a whole, and I suppose if you were the gambling type, you could have made a ton of money betting on those teams to make the playoffs before the season. They were not a huge surprise to analysts in my position.
Okay.
The 1984 Cubs, very famously, and I will quote from it here, Bill James basically called them miracle team in his Bill James baseball abstract. If you want to talk about one prediction that made Bill James, his name carry far and wide throughout the land when he was still writing books, and was still the sport was still very, very anti-analytics, that was the team. The other one is the 2008 Rays, and that is obviously an era when I was writing. Baseball Prospectus was active, and my longtime colleague Nate Silver was still writing about baseball. This was literally a few months before he started 538.com. He was still writing about baseball. Now, you have to, and I think the Rays are obviously relevant because the Royals have hired Matt Quatraro and Paul Hoover as well. The story of this season's Royals, are they the new Rays, right? This is the racification. Are they starting the process of what Tampa Bay did? You certainly have to hope so, because it's easy to forget how hapless the Rays were for the first 10 years of their existence. From 1998, when they were an expansion team, through 2007, they were the Devil Rays. Remember the Devil Rays era? They never won more than 70 games in a season. I mean, you could take that 10-year chunk, drop it into the Royals franchise encyclopedia on baseballreference.com. You would not know the difference. They were either bad or they were terrible every year. They had a new owner who's made his money in hedge fund using data, brought in a whole bunch of analytics guys between at the end of 2006 and the end of 2007. They made a huge overhaul in the way they did things. They went into 2008. They won the pennant. Remember, they won 97 games. They went from 66 to 97. And they've basically been the Rays like the good Rays ever since. The best team in baseball, dollar for dollar, ever since. But Nate Silver saw it coming before the 2008 season, writing for Sports Illustrated, where, let's see here, Baseball Prospectus is not prepared to call the 2008 Tampa Bay Rays the best team in the American League, but its PECOTA projection system forecasts an 88 and 74 finish for baseball's perennial bottom feeders, a 22-win jump from 2007. He actually underestimated they won 31 more games, but at the time, this was considered radical. The points he makes, though, they had a bunch of young hitters: Carl Crawford, Carlos Pena, B.J. Upton, a rookie coming up named Evan Longoria. On the pitching side, David Price, Jacob McGee, and this made me laugh, Wade Davis were the names he mentioned. The point is they had a lot of young talent, especially young hitting talent. And I don't think Pasquantino, Witt, Massey, Melendez are necessarily at the level of Crawford, Pena, Upton, Longoria, but I mean, Witt fits the Longoria role pretty well.
Yeah.
Pasquantino's better than Carlos Pena, I think. There are some similarities. The reason this comparison I don't think fits great, because the next paragraph, it's in the field, though, that the Rays will make their biggest gains. According to Baseball Prospectus's fielding runs above average, the Rays gave up 72 more runs than an average defense last season. Of that total, 56 resulted from poor middle infield play from Brendan Harris and Josh Wilson at shortstop, and saw B.J. Upton commit 12 errors in 48 games at second base before moving him to center field. He goes on to basically say they acquired Jason Bartlett in the Delman Young trade. So they traded away a terrible defensive left fielder, got a good defensive shortstop, and then moved Akinora Iwamura to second from third base, where he was good. To second base, he was much better. Brought in Evan Longoria. And I remember this at the time. And then getting B.J. Upton off the infield was absolutely vital. That he was a terrible defensive second baseman, became a good defensive center fielder. They upgraded their defense at like 5 different positions in one offseason. And I bring that up because that is exactly what happened. Like their defense went from like league worst to one of the league's best in the span of a single offseason, which made their pitching look so much better.
Right.
And I bring that up because that's the road not taken by the Royals, right? We've talked about. Could they move Witt to third base and then, put Nicky Lopez at short, do something, take MJ Melendez out from behind the plate for the love of God. They're not doing those things. I mean, Freddie, for me, we thought would make the opening day roster. He's been sent down. It looks like they're going into the season with MJ Melendez once again catching like twice a week and hoping that somehow he'll learn how to play defense while playing left field 5 times a week. So this to me is a missed opportunity because the 2008 Rays model is not something the Royals are really following.
And they could have.
They could have. I think they could have, and I'm disappointed that they're not.
It would probably be Nick Prado at first base as well, and just living with the substandard offense.
There's a way to construct the talent they have to make the defense so much better. And they really didn't have to go out and get much talent. Now, there's word Jackie Bradley Jr. may actually make the roster, which, I mean, Jackie Bradley, his bat is gone. He cannot hit. The last 2 seasons combined, I think his OPS plus was like 45. But he can play defense. And if they get Melendez off the field, like they could go with like Bradley, Isbell, and Nate Eaton in the outfield. That's an insanely good defensive outfield. So outfield-wise, they at least have that option. I just don't see it on the infield.
Yeah.
So that part of it, I'm going to put that one aside. I don't think the Rays model matters. But I'm going to pull here. You can see it here on the screen for those of you watching live. My 1984 Bill James baseball abstract. It was one of my favorite essays he's ever written because here I'll read right here. To get back to the Chicago Cubs, if I have ever seen a dead giveaway setup for a miracle, this is it. That's not hedging your bets. That's just calling your shot. Right. And for those of you who do not recall, going into 1984, the Chicago Cubs had not made the playoffs in 39 years, since 1945. The 83 Cubs lost 91 games. They had not been above 500 since 1972. Right? This is a team that had not done the damn thing. Nobody expected them to, except Bill James. And in 1984, they won 96 games, won the NL East, almost went to the World Series. And Bill James called it. See, he has a couple of reasons here. I'll read very, very quick summation of them. The first one is a substantial portion of the 19-game difference between the Cubs and the top of the division is not a real difference in talent. What he's calling about here is basically that the Cubs, they're based on the runs they scored, runs they allowed, they were a better team than their record suggested. Okay. That is not the case of the Royals. The Royals won 65 games last year. If you look at runs scored, runs allowed, they should have won actually 64. However, the Guardians, who won the division, also overachieved based on their runs and runs allowed. I think they won 92 games, but they actually should have won about 88. And they were the best team in the division. And I think the Twins, I want to say the Twins were outscored last season. The Twins were the Twins won 78 games, but outscored their opponents. I believe the White Sox were the ones, 81 and 81. And yeah, they were outscored. So based purely on the competition, this is why I mentioned this earlier, the competition of the division is not overwhelming. There's not a lot of ground to make up. Any other division in baseball, you'd have to win 25, maybe even 30 to 35 games more to win the division. If the Royals win 20 more games, they'll be in the hunt. So that's one. Okay, I know it sounds like a small thing, but when you're talking about,
you are right. You are. It's just if they win 20 more games.
Well, we're both projecting them to win 12 more. So, like, how much more is 20? Honestly,
8.
But yeah, well, 8 more games. Okay, this is the one that really.
I thought you did advanced analytics. Whatever.
Sometimes. Okay, the second reason though, is what Bill James had referred to. The little inside baseball. He calls it the Schotten syndrome. Bert Schotten was a manager who had taken over. I can't remember which team in the 50s. Who had their previous manager was a hard ass, was high pressure, like a Billy Martin type.
Right.
High pressure, always kept players on their toes. He comes in, he's low stress, low key, and his team made a huge jump in the standings. And he makes the point here. Lee Elia, who was the previous Cubs manager, is definitely a high-pressure manager. You may remember Lee Elia because he has maybe the most famous post-game rant of all time. That if you can find it, if you've never heard Lee Elia's rant about 85% of the world is working and the other 15% come to Cubs games, it's worth listening to. There's about 73 F-bombs in there as well. But that's Lee Elia in a nutshell. Lee Elia is definitely a high-pressure manager, and Jim Fry, who you might recall from his time in Kansas City, is definitely a low-pressure manager and optimist. When that happens, the team usually has a good year. And for all that we've talked about Cal Eldred being replaced by Brian Sweeney, we really haven't talked a lot about Mike Matheny being replaced by Matt Quatraro. And I think if you were to talk about Mike Matheny and pressure, I think everyone would agree he was on the high pressure side of things.
Yeah.
And Matt Quatraro comes in and he's like, "This is your clubhouse, guys." We'll see how he turns out to be, but the management style when you allow players to be themselves after they've been uptight and kind of looking over their shoulder for a couple of years, that's when you sometimes get players suddenly playing the best baseball of their lives. That I thought was a really interesting one.
Yeah.
The third one, miracles usually happen in compressed leagues and leagues where the difference between the best teams and the worst teams is not too wide. We just went over that. That's also, I think something that that plays a part here. And then here, the Cubs have taken steps this winter to solidify their pitching, something that almost all miracle teams do. In terms of talent, no. In terms of trying to address pitching specifically, the Royals have absolutely made a commitment to that. And then the sixth one, the final one, the Cubs have a specific correctable weakness action on which they can have a huge impact on their one-lost record. This was funny because he was specifically speaking about the fact that the Cubs could not win on artificial turf. That tells you how much the game has changed.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about artificial turf in decades, but the point is, like, they had a specific weakness. They couldn't win on artificial turf because basically they weren't fast enough. Speed was back then. The National League was like half the teams in the sport played on artificial turf, and speed was very important. The Cubs were a slow, plodding team, and they went out and tried to get some athleticism. That's not the specifics here, but with the Royals, they have a specific weakness. Their pitching is terrible. It's much easier to fix a weakness than it is to make an average talent a strength. And the Royals, all they have to do is make the pitching mediocre. So I really do feel like there are some interesting similarities. The managing change is the one that really caught my eye. If we look back at this season and the Royals are in contention in September, you absolutely know that Matt Quatraro is going to deservedly get a lot of the credit for that. And I think we may be underplaying the possibility that happens. So I'm not saying it will be a miracle season. I'm saying I won't be surprised if it is.
If that's not optimism, a man digging through decades
40-year-old texts
to find reasons to point you in the right direction that the Royals can be a winner, then I don't know what optimism is. And neither do you if you don't see that as optimistic, for crying out loud. That is absolutely fantastic. Remember, again, Asphalt and Concrete, our fine sponsor, one contractor, all things parking lots, free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online right now. They can make those parking lot problems disappear. Call 816-484-3338 online at GannAsphalt.com. They're hiring as well, so check it out. If you're looking, join one of the best and fastest growing companies in Kansas City, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. We also would ask you to hit that like button, that love button, the subscribe button. Doesn't cost you nothing, but it does us a lot of great good. So if you're a big fan of the podcast, we appreciate you listening, viewing, watching, consuming it however you do. Make sure you hit those buttons as well. So for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here in Kauffman Corner.